and sit down and enjoy my own damn self. You can identify yourself.
You in so much competition with me. You jealous, Willie? I can't have it.
So they try to put you in a dress?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was kind of like, you know, you're gonna bite this bullet and then you in. Well, you got the wrong.
For nearly 4 decades, Don D.C. Curry has been making audiences laugh while quietly battling an industry that demanded he compromise his soul for success. At 66 years old, the legendary comedian is finally ready to confirm the awful rumors that have followed him throughout his career.
I had gotten so much for next Friday. When I did Friday after next, I bumped head with the producers. Because Cube at that point had gotten so big, Cube had basically stepped out of the negotiations and stuff. So I bumped head with the producers.
They offered him millions. All he had to do was put on a dress. 3 different times, Hollywood came knocking with the same twisted request. Each time, D.C. Curry said no. Each time, it cost him everything. So let's get into it. Don D.C. Curry wasn't supposed to be a comedian. He was supposed to be in the major leagues, playing first base for the Detroit Tigers, living the American dream that starts with a leather glove and ends with a World Series ring.
I played Victoria, Canada with Victoria Blues. I played San Luis, Mexico, and then I signed with Detroit Tigers.
From Canada to Mexico, D.C. chased that baseball dream through the minor leagues. But while his teammates hit the disco scene after games, D.C. found himself drawn to something completely different.
So after games, everybody would roll their sleeves, roll their jacket sleeves up and go and dance. Well, I never did that. I couldn't dance, man. So I would go, as long as I can remember in my career, I would go to the comedy club, and we were out of town on the road after games. Wow. I go to comedy club, and I used to like open mic night.
Night after night, city after city, D.C. sat in the back of comedy clubs studying the craft. He watched comedians bomb spectacularly. He saw others kill. He was unconsciously preparing for a career he didn't even know he wanted. Then it happened. One night at an open mic, they ran out of amateur participants.
So ain't nobody in there know me, so I couldn't embarrass myself. Ain't nobody know me.
Right.
And I went up.
Really?
As 11,012 shows.
That was it. The moment that changed everything. D.C. was supposed to do 4 minutes, but burned through every joke he'd ever heard in just 2 minutes. The crowd was lukewarm, but something clicked that night. Something that would lead to 38 years in comedy and over 11,000 documented performances.
I recorded every show I did at that time. And I would just listen to it, man, just repeatedly. And I should have said this first. I should have said that first.
D.C. brought his athletic discipline to comedy. He recorded every set, analyzed every joke, treated the craft like a science. This methodical approach would prove crucial when Hollywood came calling with offers that tested everything he believed in. But first, he had to survive the comedy trenches. His first paid gig was opening for Paul Mooney, 14 shows for $70.
And at the end of the week, at Sunday night after we did the last show, they handed me a pink slip, said I owed them $123 for what I had drank.
After 2 weeks of work, D.C. actually owed the club money. But he was hooked. The stage became his new diamond, the microphone his new bat. And unlike baseball, where talent could take you only so far, comedy would test something deeper: his character, his principles, his willingness to compromise his soul for success. The baseball dream was dead. The comedy nightmare was just beginning. Success in Hollywood came with a price tag D.C. Curry never expected. As his star rose through BET's Comic View and major movie roles, a disturbing pattern emerged. Behind closed doors, executives had a special request for successful black comedians.
And it was kind of like, you know, you're gonna bite this bullet and then you in. Well, you got the wrong.
The first time it happened, D.C. was riding high on Grace Under Fire with Brett Butler. The ABC sitcom was a hit. Syndication money was flowing, and D.C.'s recurring role was paying serious dividends. Then the writers had an idea. They wanted him in a dress.
Wanted me to be Brett's love interest.
Ooh-wee!
And I don't think America was ready for that.
Well, hold on, was America what you ready for? Would you?
I'm an American.
Hell no.
DC said no. The show moved on without him. The money disappeared. But the requests didn't stop. Hollywood had a systematic approach to successful black male comedians. Once you reached a certain level, once you proved you could make them money, they'd come with the ultimate test of submission.
In my personal opinion, it's making you bow down. If you bow down, okay, all right. You want in? All right. Bow down.
Movie roles, television specials, major studio pictures. The dress requirement appeared like clockwork. Each offer came with bigger money, bigger exposure, bigger stakes. And each time, DC walked away. He watched other comedians make different choices. He saw careers explode overnight after that one dress scene. He saw the pattern but refused to participate.
So far away. What do you want me to be a woman for when you got black women actresses who are funny in Hollywood, been out there trying to make it, and you want to give me a part like that?
DC saw the deeper game being played. Hollywood was systematically humiliating successful black men for white audiences' entertainment, while simultaneously denying opportunities to actual black women performers. The third time they came with the dress, the money was in the millions.
I'm not willing to compromise to that extent for no measly amount of money. And I'm saying measly, a few $1 million.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars for wearing a dress, for 15 minutes of footage that would follow him forever, for bowing down to an industry that demanded submission disguised as comedy. DC said no. Again. The projects moved forward. Other comedians took the roles. The money went elsewhere. And DC Curry's reputation in Hollywood shifted from bankable talent to difficult actor who won't play the game. 3 times they offered him millions. 3 times he said no. 3 times it cost him everything. The Friday movies should have made DC Curry rich. The first film was a cultural phenomenon. Next Friday dominated the box office, and Friday after next was guaranteed money. But behind the scenes, DC was learning that success in Hollywood meant navigating treacherous politics where one wrong move could cost you everything.
When I did Friday after next, because I had gotten so much for next Friday, when I did Friday after next, I bumped head with the producers. Because Cube at that point had gotten so big, Cube had basically stepped out of the negotiations.
Ice Cube had become too big for producer meetings. The franchise was printing money, but the business side had turned ugly. DC found himself locked in negotiations with executives who thought they could lowball him because Cube wasn't in the room. They were wrong. DC made a power move that could have ended his career. He called Ice Cube directly and essentially threatened to walk away from the franchise. One phone call that could have gotten him blacklisted from Hollywood forever.
Ice Cube said to me, DC, what you want? And I told him. He said, call him back in 15 minutes. And I come back 15 minutes, they asked me when I could come in and sign the papers. I said, damn, I was too cheap.
15 minutes. That's how long it took Ice Cube to resolve what the producers had been dragging out for weeks. The message was clear: respect DC Curry or find a new actor. But not everyone on the Friday set had DC's leverage or backbone.
Whitley, who didn't do Friday after next because bumped head with the producer. But I told her, call Cube. You know Cube.
Right.
We all talking, we was on set.
Right.
I said, call Cube. And she wouldn't do it. So that's when they went and basically got some more.
Kim Whitley faced the same producer bullying, but chose not to fight back. She lost her role to Summer because she wouldn't make that crucial phone call to Ice Cube. In Hollywood, sometimes the difference between career survival and career death comes down to one moment of courage. The Friday set became a family affair, with Ice Cube even casting his own mother in a cameo. but the family atmosphere on camera masked the brutal business realities behind the scenes. DC learned that in Hollywood, loyalty flows upward. The executives who tried to shortchange him had no problem replacing him if he didn't play ball. Only direct intervention from the top, from Ice Cube himself, saved DC's place in the franchise. The Friday Wars taught DC a crucial lesson. In Hollywood, you're either at the table or on the menu. DC Curry thought he'd found a safe space at BET. Comic View was supposed to be different, a platform for black comedians who'd been systematically excluded from white television. DC became the host, the face of black comedy for millions of viewers. Then, BET made a decision that would expose the ugly truth about black entertainment in America. As DC explained, he had served as the host of Comic View when Gary Owen became the new host. The significance of this change couldn't be understated. Bet had been created during an era when becoming a legitimate comedian required appearing on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, a milestone that was virtually impossible for black performers to achieve due to systemic exclusion from mainstream white television. BET existed precisely because Johnny Carson wouldn't book black comedians. The network was supposed to be an alternative, a place where black talent could shine without begging for white approval. DC understood the mission and embraced his role as the face of that movement. Then came the announcement that shattered everything. BET had positioned Comic View as an avenue for black comics to be heard, giving voice to performers who had been shut out of traditional platforms. DC admits he was deeply troubled when Gary Owen was chosen to be the host, and his concerns were far from unfounded. Gary Owen, a white comedian, would be the new host of Comic View. The show created specifically for black comedians excluded from white television would now be hosted by a white man. The irony was devastating, but DC wasn't the only one who recognized the betrayal. The announcement ceremony became a legendary moment in comedy history. Richard Pryor, the godfather of black comedy and one of the few black performers who had successfully broken through to Johnny Carson's show, was present at the event alongside DC. When BET announced that Gary Owen would be the next host, Pryor's reaction was immediate and explosive. He unleashed a stream of expletives, stood up from his table, and walked out of the ceremony in disgust. Pryor's outrage wasn't just about personal disappointment, it was about principle. Even someone who had achieved the ultimate validation of appearing on Johnny Carson understood what BET's executives apparently didn't, or chose to ignore. As DC recounted, Pryor was furious that BET would create a vehicle specifically designed to expose black comics to audiences, only to allow someone who wasn't a member of the community the show was meant to help come in and take advantage of that opportunity. Pryor grasped what the Gary Owen decision represented, a fundamental betrayal of Comic View's mission. This wasn't just another television show. It was a lifeline for black comedians who had been systematically locked out of mainstream platforms. By handing the hosting duties to a white performer, BET was destroying the very purpose for which the show had been created. The Gary Owen controversy revealed a painful truth about black entertainment in America. Even spaces created specifically for black artists would ultimately be sacrificed for white marketability once they became profitable enough to attract mainstream attention. The network executives believed that a white host would bring in larger, more diverse audiences, the same thinking that had excluded black performers from shows like Johnny Carson in the first place. DC watched his hosting role disappear, not because he lacked talent, professionalism, or audience appeal, but because BET decided a white face would be more commercially viable. The network that had positioned itself as different from mainstream television, as a sanctuary for black talent, had become exactly what it was supposedly created to oppose. The decision exposed the harsh reality that even within black-owned media, the pursuit of crossover success and white audience approval could override the original mission of supporting and promoting black artists. Comic View's transformation from a platform for excluded black comedians to a show hosted by a white performer represented everything wrong with how black entertainment was commodified and co-opted in pursuit of broader market appeal. In comedy, friendships can be destroyed by a single joke. DC Curry learned this lesson the hard way when a casual comment about Steve Harvey's hairpiece ended a friendship for 3 years and revealed the dangerous sensitivity that exists behind the laughs. It was supposed to be a regular comedy show in Memphis about 20 years ago. DC Steve Harvey and NBA star Penny Hardaway were backstage in a green room with notoriously low ceilings and a ceiling fan that seemed to hang just inches above everyone's head. Steve Harvey was standing directly under the spinning blades.
I said in my young stupidity, Steve, you better get out from that ceiling fan before your toupee get caught up in that thing.
Why did you say that?
And Steve did not speak to me for about 3 years.
One joke, one casual comment about Steve's hairpiece getting caught in the ceiling fan. The kind of backstage ribbing that comedians dish out to each other every single day. But Steve Harvey didn't laugh. He stopped speaking to DC entirely. 3 years of silence. At comedy shows, industry events, backstage encounters, Steve Harvey treated DC Curry like he didn't exist, all over a hair joke that lasted 5 seconds. The comedy community watched this feud with fascination and bewilderment. Here were 2 successful black comedians, both climbing the ladder of success, both needing each other's support in an industry that already had enough obstacles. But Steve's sensitivity about his appearance had created an impossible rift. Their reconciliation came by accident. DC was shopping at Neiman Marcus when Steve walked into the same shoe section. DC, still thinking Steve was angry, stayed quiet. But Steve made the first move, acknowledging that DC was a bigger man for not escalating the situation. DC's reaction to the 3-year freeze-out reveals his philosophical approach to industry conflicts. While Steve stewed in anger, DC moved on with his life, recognizing that grudges only hurt the person holding them. The ceiling fan incident became legendary in comedy circles, a cautionary tale about how personal insecurities can destroy professional relationships and how one careless joke can cost you years of friendship. To understand DC Curry's comedy philosophy, you have to understand Paul Mooney, the most fearlessly offensive comedian who ever lived, a man who could empty entire rooms while laughing at the chaos he created. As DC explains, Aries Spears comes from the school of Paul Mooney, and Paul Mooney was simply the most offensive artist of all time. This wasn't hyperbole. It was an accurate assessment of a comedian who operated on a completely different level from his peers. Paul Mooney didn't just push boundaries, he obliterated them. While other comedians tested the waters of controversial material, Mooney dove headfirst into the deep end, dragging audiences into conversations they weren't ready to have. DC witnessed Mooney's legendary performances firsthand, describing shows where clubs would start with 400 or 500 people, only to watch Mooney systematically clear the room. The remarkable thing wasn't that audiences left, it was that Mooney took pride in driving them away. He would be laughing his ass off as people fled, genuinely proud that his material was too intense for mainstream consumption. DC watched him completely empty venues, transforming packed clubs into ghost towns through sheer comedic fearlessness. DC worked at the Comedy Store back in the day and witnessed Mooney's room-clearing performances regularly. The club management learned to schedule Mooney last on the lineup because no other comedian could follow his scorched earth approach. They understood that once Mooney took the stage, the show was effectively over for anyone else. A typical Mooney set would start at midnight with 185 people in attendance and end with maybe 20 brave souls who could handle his unfiltered social commentary. While audiences fled in horror, DC stayed and watched, eating popcorn and encouraging Mooney to keep pushing. he saw something in Mooney's fearless approach that would later influence his own comedy philosophy. DC genuinely loved every bit of it, staying through entire performances and cheering Mooney on with calls to keep it real. The ultimate validation of Mooney's power came from the comedy industry itself. Many famous comedians would sneak into the Comedy Store specifically to watch Mooney perform, but they would hide in the corners of the club. They wanted to witness his fearless approach to comedy, but couldn't risk being seen publicly supporting such controversial material. This strange ritual of famous performers secretly studying Mooney while maintaining plausible deniability spoke to both his influence and the industry's fear of association with his uncompromising style. Mooney represented everything Hollywood feared: a black comedian who couldn't be controlled, bought, or silenced. He said exactly what he thought. Consequences be damned. His comedy wasn't designed for mass appeal or network television. It was raw, unfiltered social commentary that forced audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about race, power, and society. DC absorbed Mooney's lesson about artistic integrity, but chose a different path. Where Mooney burned bridges for art's sake, DC found ways to maintain his principles without destroying his career entirely. But the influence was unmistakable. Both men refused to compromise their core beliefs for industry acceptance, though they expressed that refusal in different ways. Paul Mooney taught DC that sometimes the most important comedy happens when the audience is uncomfortable, when they're forced to confront truths they'd rather ignore. This philosophy would guide DC through his own career challenges, from the dress incidents to producer conflicts to industry battles. The willingness to make audiences uncomfortable in service of a larger truth became central to DC's approach to comedy. The dress incidents, the producer conflicts, the industry battles, they all trace back to lessons learned watching Paul Mooney clear rooms while laughing at his own fearlessness. DC learned that maintaining artistic integrity sometimes means accepting that not everyone will appreciate or understand your choices, but that the alternative, compromising your principles for broader acceptance, ultimately destroys what makes comedy powerful in the first place. At 66, Don DC Curry sits in his Georgia compound, surrounded by 50 acres and the wreckage of Hollywood dreams he chose to abandon rather than compromise his soul. The dress incidents cost him millions. The producer conflicts cost him roles. The principled stands cost him everything the industry measures as success. He has no regrets. While other entertainers obsess over their posthumous reputation, DC focuses on present-moment impact. This philosophy explains every controversial choice that defined his career, from walking away from millions to refusing industry pressure to conform. The final tally is staggering, and DC is brutally honest about what his principles cost him. He acknowledges that he wasn't willing to compromise to that extent for what he calls no measly amount of money, even though the offers immediately reached into the millions. 3 dress incidents, multiple millions in lost earnings, roles that went to comedians willing to play the game, projects that moved forward without him, an entire alternative timeline where DC Curry became a household name by sacrificing his dignity for white entertainment. Instead, he achieved something rarer than wealth. He maintained his authentic self in an industry designed to destroy individual identity. He made enough money to live comfortably without selling his soul for astronomical riches. DC's approach to his career has been deliberately measured. As he explains it, he paces himself and has managed to stay all right throughout his journey. His refusal to sell his soul or kill himself trying to achieve billion-dollar success sets him apart in an industry obsessed with maximum profits at any cost. He respects those who pursue that path, but it wasn't for him. The entertainment industry's pressure to sell your soul isn't metaphorical. DC watched colleagues make compromises that fundamentally changed who they were as human beings. His decision to pace himself rather than chase maximum profits allowed him to survive with his identity intact. After 38 years and over 11,000 performances, D.C. Curry's career represents a different kind of success story. Not the rags-to-riches narrative Hollywood loves, but something more complex. The story of a man who chose dignity over dollars, principles over popularity, authenticity over acceptance. From that first spontaneous performance to today, D.C. Curry has documented every show, every choice, every moment where money and morality collided. The awful rumors are true. Hollywood did try to put him in a dress 3 times. They did offer him millions to compromise his principles. They did punish him for refusing to bow down. His Georgia compound stands as a testament to a different kind of victory. While he may not have achieved the astronomical wealth that comes with complete industry compliance, he built a life on his own terms. The 50 acres represent freedom, not just financial independence, but the deeper liberation that comes from never having to look in the mirror and wonder who you became in pursuit of success. And at 66, Don D.C. Curry confirms it all with a smile, knowing he chose the harder path and emerged with something more valuable than money: his soul intact. In an industry built on submission, D.C. Curry's refusal to compromise represents the ultimate victory. He may not have conquered Hollywood, but he conquered something far more challenging: the temptation to sacrifice his principles for profit. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.